Welcome to Two Humans Talking, the podcast that talks about what it takes to actually be healthy and whole in this modern, fast paced world. I am your host, Tiffany Simms, and today I feel so honored to be in this woman's presence. We are going to talk about how to find peace when you're just really busy and you don't know which way is up. And I think that at this time of year, we're coming in the end of January and we came out of the holidays. The world is spinning. We're getting back into the groove of things and we're starting to step into our busyness. And so I think this is going to be such a beautiful, beautiful conversation. So, did I say that right?
You did.
Cool. I'll clip that part out. I said it and I was like, oh, so I need to make a note that I'll clip that. Um, Thank you so much for being here and being open to sharing your experiences and what you've learned so that we can help our besties listening
Mm,
get there a little faster with a little less struggle.
yeah. Tiffany, thank you for having me. Before we hit record, we've already had a dance party and a conversation, and I'm already feeling like this is going to be such a beautiful conversation and connection. And so I too am honored to be sitting here and being able to have this conversation with you.
Oh, I love that. Yes, we did have a dance party. Sometimes you come into a day and your energy is
Yeah.
just stuck. And so we
hmm
had a little dance party to move some
Yeah.
things around and feel joyful and playful in
hmm
our bodies so that we could like show up and do the thing that we wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Do
was
you
so timely.
mind do you mind sharing with our bestie listening just a little bit about yourself? What makes you
Yeah.
you?
Whew. Uh, that's the first time I've been asked that question that way. So whenever I tell my story, I start with the beginning because it is such an important part of who I am, but I won't give like a long drawn out story. My conception story led to a lot of trauma for me and limiting beliefs and unworthiness. I was born to a teen mom and I've never met my biological father, and like that as my foundation made me grow up even as a child feeling very unworthy and like afraid to be seen and just like undeserving. And I did really well with masking those feelings, the shame, the guilt, like all of the feelings that came with that story by overachieving and being super ambitious. And so I went through life really masking a lot of internal pain, hurt that I was feeling. As a child, I could feel that things were off and there was a void, but I couldn't like process it. And, I just kind of held it in and learned to suppress those emotions at an early age. And so I started overeating at a very young age to cope with how I was feeling. It was never something that my mom and I talked about. It was like the big elephant in the room that we just kind of wiggled around. I didn't have my first conversation to really get answers about my conception story and my dad until I was 30 years old. And it was because I was turning 30 and I was like, okay, now it's time. So I moved through my life, right, with this like underlying I would say depression, this underlying unworthiness. And again, it was always like this voice internally that was saying, you're not good enough. You're not good enough. No matter what you do, you're not good enough. And I tried to like outrun that voice by just doing more, right? Like pushing more. And I would just burn out all the time. But I had done a really good job of putting on a show for the world. So people would look at me and like, applaud me, tell me that I'm doing so well. And I would take the compliments, and I did not see myself that way. I lived like that for 2.5 decades. When I got into my early 30s, from 8 years old up until my early 30s, I was like, enough is enough. I am tired of feeling tired. I'm tired of being stuck in this story. This story is holding me back. I can feel that there's more for my life, but I can't get past this story. And so I started just, going on my own healing journey, exploring different modalities. There's been a lot of things that I've been open to over the years outside of just traditional therapy. And really, it's been in the just the following of the next breadcrumb, right? Like I start with the first step and then that leads to something else. And that's really been so much of my journey. I am here today because of my own healing process. Like everything that I teach, I first embodied, it transformed my
Yeah.
life, and then I wanted to share it out with other people. And so that's a little bit about who I am and why I'm so passionate about the work that I do, because I believe that we all have a purpose. Like our souls all said yes to something before we came here, but then we get stuck in our like icky trauma and, all of the stories, and we're afraid to really step into who we are meant to be. And especially as women, like when we lead, when we have businesses or, when we're leaders, we change the world because we care about people. Like we do things in a different way. And so I think it's so important for us to move all of that stuff out of the way to do the purpose work we're feeling called to do.
I love that. I have so many things swirling in my head. One of them is I find it really amazing
Mm,
that the people that we interact with are mirror reflections and bring conversations into our lives of what we're internally
mm,
processing and thinking about. Because so much of what you said, like I've experienced myself.
mhm,
I developed a binge eating disorder. I'm pretty sure it probably started when I was like 10. I used to like hide in the fridge and like I would eat condiments and I would
mm,
stuff as much food in my face
oh,
as quickly as I can before I could get caught as my way of like when I look back now, it was like my way of trying to regulate my nervous system
mm,
and like food was it and that developed a
mhm,
pattern throughout life and that I had to work with. And then when you were sharing about like just my own journey, I literally just wrote those words in a workshop presentation that I was working on. It was like, you know what, sharing like about the parts that make me different is that I didn't just study this because I thought it was
mhm,
cool.
yeah,
I did all these things to solve my own problems, and then I
mm,
spent the last 5 years mastering how to teach it to other people.
yeah,
And so I just find it so cool how
mm,
the universe brings us mirrors
mm,
of the things that we're processing
yeah,
and like exploring ourselves. I think that's so
yeah,
cool. And she didn't share this with you, but she shared this with me behind the scenes. She's a
mhm.
mom of two beautiful
Oh
girls.
yes, I know.
And and the other question I have is like, cool, all of that stuff is so cool, but like if I
Mhm,
found you on a day where you were just being you,
mm,
like
mhm,
what do you do on a day that's just you?
mhm. Hmm. So I will say what I do and then what I'm working on doing more of. So I am a I talked about like very ambitious person, very structured. At times I can be very rigid and that works well in some ways, that structure and rigidity, but then it's like a double-edged sword where it can be too extreme and then I forget to like live my life. And so as an entrepreneur, I'm always like kind of finding that balance. I'm not necessarily like burned out because I've done a really good job of learning how to take care of that, but like, mental health wise, I sometimes forget to have fun, and so I'm trying to incorporate more fun and play into my life. And so on a day where I am not working and not doing all of the like things that I have to do, I'm usually outside. I am an outdoors nature girl. I love hiking, I love trails, I love getting my girls outside into nature and just like exposing them to the calming grounding impacts of nature. So that would be like the first thing that I would say that I would want to do. It's cold here
Playing
right
in the
now.
woods.
Playing in the woods, playing in the woods. It's really cold right now in Baltimore. So I'm like, I'm not outside as much, which,
Southern Maryland.
yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm in
Oh,
Calvert
nice.
County.
Oh, yeah,
We can
we're
go
so
play in the
close.
woods
I
together.
know. We can go dance in the woods. We can totally go dance in the woods. So that's my jam. When I'm not doing that, I love things that are creative. And so arts and crafts and like that lets me tap into my inner child, and my kids love that. And so I would say, like, usually those are kind of the places where I like to play.
Oh, that's so, so fun. I also love being outside. I find the
Mm.
water really
Oh,
grounding.
yeah.
And so,
Hmm.
like here outside of my office, there's a lake in my backyard, and at the end
Hmm.
of the street, I live on a river. And so, like the water, whenever I get cloudy, like we have dance parties, um,
Hmm.
or I'm just like, you know what? Like we just need to go take a 10-minute walk around the lake, and all of a sudden, just being outside for me, leaving my phone at home and
Hmm.
just going allows all of the fog to lift.
Yeah.
And I come back and it's like, oh, I know what I need to do now.
Hmm.
Not out of
Hmm.
obligation or guilt or shame or like that heaviness of like, oh my God, I have this project. It's like, oh, I know what I need to do.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it's so, so cool. And all of us have our own thing. And so if you're listening right now, I really encourage you, like, explore if you don't know what your thing is to
Yeah.
help release the fog, like,
Yeah.
explore that. Maybe it's
Hmm.
coloring, maybe it's quilting, maybe it's being outside or reading a book or being creative in some way. Like, there's so many ways to help do that. And so I really do encourage you to just explore and be playful.
Yeah.
Be your mom. Go sign you up for things to see like, we do that for kids all the time, right? It's like,
Yeah.
let's put you in gymnastics, in art
I
class,
know.
in this and that, and see what you like.
Hmm.
Sometimes we gotta do that as adults too. We
Mm.
just don't have a mom doing it for us.
Yeah. I love that you said that. I think that's so beautiful. Be your mom and like allow yourself to be curious and explore. Because we do, like as adults, I was just having this conversation with a friend on Friday. It's like I felt like my inner children, like all elementary, middle, high school, like they were all like coming together and rebelling against adult me because it was just like, we haven't had fun in a really long time. And so I have to like remind myself more to like be curious, to be playful. And so that is as like this year, like that's my intention is I don't have a whole bunch of goals and things that I'm working on. I'm literally just trying to make sure that I prioritize more joy, more playfulness, more fun into my life because I can get away from that so easy. I think a lot of us do.
Yeah. You know, my brain just like had like a moment and it was just like that is it, right? Like that is the like mystery and the puzzle piece that we're all trying to actually figure out. What does that look like for
Yeah.
us?
Mm-hmm.
So like when you are busy, that is the finding the peace. It's like that breath moment is
Mm-hmm.
what I hear you saying is like,
Mm-hmm.
let me take the breath and what would bring me joy in this moment and like
Mm-hmm.
what actually isn't important that I need to let go of
Yeah.
or I can come back to later.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Did I hear that? Like, is that the essence of what you were sharing, or were you going a different direction with that?
No, I think that that's correct. I love the question of what would bring me joy into this moment. And I will just add that like for the women that are listening that are like me who are like more rigid planners, something that my friend said that was really helpful is like, so maybe I'm not as spontaneous. Maybe I would forget to ask myself that in the middle of the day or the week. She's like, schedule in time, like how your calendar is packed with all the other things for fun, for joy. And so now it's like I'm holding myself accountable to like having more joy. I'm being more intentional about that in a way that like makes sense for the structure that I like. And so an example of that is just like putting time on my calendar to go to a cafe, to interact with other humans, like to go to a place that I enjoy, right? And like so when I think about joy, it doesn't have to be like really big things. It can just be like a really nice eat or really nice afternoon with a cup of coffee at a cafe that I enjoy. So I just wanted to add that you know I feel like there's two kind of people. There's the more spontaneous people who might think about that in the middle of their day, and then there's the people that are super programmed like me who are super structured. And so if you resonate with that, it's like you can still kind of have that playfulness and curiosity, but like put it in your day like some of the other things that are
I
on your
love
calendar.
that you say that because I am more of a spontaneous kind of
Mm-hmm.
person. However, I, for my life to work the way I want it to work, I have to be intentional about that. So for me, if it's not in my calendar, it's not happening.
Exactly.
And so
Yeah.
that involved for me involves also like yes, I might be more of a spontaneous in the
Mm-hmm.
moment person, but like I also schedule it in
Yeah.
because everything important to me is on my calendar holding a space so no one
Yeah.
else takes control of that time.
Yep.
And that includes like my girlfriends are coming over tomorrow night because I realized it had been too long and I needed to play with
Mm-hmm.
them. So they're coming
Mm-hmm.
over in their PJs and we're going to order Chinese food and we're going to watch Christmas movies.
I
It's
love
on
that.
the calendar.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so like I have on the calendar, I told you earlier, share with you earlier, like I love walking my dog. There is a block in my calendar that says go walk the dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like why are we leaving so much of our life up to chance?
Mm-hmm. 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 And I agree with you that like when I facilitate workshops and I talk about like finding harmony, I don't believe in balance because I feel like it's never going to be like even, right? Harmony. Like how do I find
Yes,
harmony in all of the
ma'am.
chaos of my life? I always tell people that if you look at your calendar, it tells you what you prioritize. So if you look at your calendar and it's filled with work or maybe your kids and you're dropping them off to all the extracurriculars and your weekend is filled with all the sports, there's nothing wrong with that, but like where are you in that process? And so for me, like I always tell people I'm very selfish about prioritizing and caring for myself because I show up so much better for all the other parts of my life when I do that. And so I'm echoing everything that you're saying about how important it is for us to schedule it and prioritize ourselves, even if it's just like a 30-minute chunk of time, finding that peace, like being intentional about that. And then sometimes, right? You get so busy that you forget. And so I love like a middle of the day. I call it a sacred pause. It's like 30 minutes in the middle of the day. And usually I'm like, what do I need right now? Sometimes it's a walk, sometimes it's jazz music, sometimes it's a nap. Like it gets to be whatever I need it to be in that moment, which kind of goes back to the question you were saying about like what brings me joy and how can you lean into that? But that is something that is held on my calendar and then I just allow myself to like attune to what I need in that moment.
We're gonna be real for a second, and I'm gonna share
Mm,
this with you because as soon as you said that, like my higher self in what I do on my like my best practices, that is true. I also just recognized that I have had a placeholder on my calendar at 1:30 every
mm,
day for a release meditation
mm,
that I have overridden and ignored,
mm,
like bypass, like it didn't like it, I haven't prioritized it because like for whatever reason, I've decided that I don't actually value that time for that because I have other things I need to do.
yeah.
And so I share that transparently because I think that sometimes we think that once we like hit the button once and we figured out the secret thing, that everything magically falls into place. And it's like, oh yeah, like there's always something that like for us to rearrange or for us to try a little
Mm,
differently or for me to just go, you know what? That's just not for me right now. Like it doesn't
mhm,
actually fill my cup and bring me joy. So why is it taking up
yeah.
space as a
Mm,
placeholder in my calendar for me to then become numb to the
mm,
appointments on my calendar?
yeah.
So I just wanted to share that with our
Yeah.
bestie because I think
Mm,
it's important to share the like what the process.
yeah. Yeah.
Is there something right now? Like, where are you in the mess of finding? Like, I know we've talked a lot about it, but like, what's the one thing, like, now that we've talked about it, that you're gonna hop off of this recording in
Mm,
this episode and like go fine tune?
mm. I love before we hit record, and I'm like a somatic practitioner, like yoga, meditation. I'm certified in those things. So I know them, right? But sometimes, just like you said, we forget, we bypass it, we get busy. When I came to this call, I was just like feeling so scattered. And I had been like working like that all day. And you were like, let's just move, like, let's just dance, let's just shake it out. And it was such a moment of like, yeah, this makes sense. Like, it's movement, we're moving the energy. So for me, I feel like the most important thing is like go back to the basics. Like sometimes I
Mm,
feel like right, we think that we have to do something super grand, whether it's to find peace, to release stress, to ground ourselves. And usually it's the most basic of things. It might be movement, it might be, like you said, a 10-minute walk around the lake. We don't have to overcomplicate the self care process, right? Because life is already so busy and challenging. It's like, what is the simplest thing, or maybe two or three things that you can hold on to so that when you have those moments, you can turn to that thing? And like, literally, when we did that dance movement, I am a sticky note girl. And so sometimes I put sticky notes in places where I want to remember. And so in my head, I thought, I'm going to write a sticky note to remember to dance, to move, to be playful during the day, because it was such a little thing, but it made such a difference.
mm. How fun will that be when you just grab your kids and just start dancing silly in the living room?
They love it.
Right?
I don't do it enough, but every now and then when I do it, they love it. They love it.
Like you just from the kitchen when you realize you're overstimulated, just like yell, dance party! And like everyone, that's now the cue word for everyone to come into the living room and like
Love
dance to their
that.
soul's beat.
Yeah, that's so good. I think I'm going to use that one. Like a safe
And
word, right?
yeah, I was to say, and like it can then become the family's moment to say,
Yeah.
I'm not okay. And
Mm,
like, what a gift to
mm,
give your
your
kids
children.
to
Yeah.
be able to just articulate, like, I'm overstimulated, I'm something, and to announce to the family that they need support in such a playful,
Mm.
non-heavy way.
Yeah, yeah. Tiffany, when you said that, it actually reminds me of something. So we talked about like this episode being centered around like peace and the busyness. I also think that there is something really beautiful about incorporating your children into the things that you do. So for me, when I first started on my wellness journey, I felt like I had to like isolate, and like I had my things, and like, I was a mom and then I was in my wellness
Yes.
space. What has really worked for me in the midst of having a busy life is like, what can I do that I incorporate them into? And so if I'm going for a walk, I'm like, grab your scooter. We're going for a walk, right? They scoot or they stop at the playground and I'll walk around, the playground. That is a way for me to get what I need, right? To bring some peace and grounding into my life, to also allow my children to move and release whatever energy they might be holding on to. So that's an example. I also love going to like places where there is childcare for me to do things. And so like I joined a gym here that has childcare. And so it's like, even with that, it's like I still get to prioritize myself in the midst of a busy life with the children. Oftentimes we feel like they're a hindrance, but I love what you said, because what I've realized is that I am teaching my children at a very young age by embodying and showing them these things. what it means to take care of yourself. And I never saw that from my mom when I was younger. I always just saw her being exhausted, stressed, overwhelmed, right? And so I had to learn these things as an adult. And so I even challenge the women that are listening who do have children to not think about them as a hindrance, but to think about like how you can pull them into your world and do something helpful for you, but also model healthy behaviors to them as well.
Yeah. I'm not a mom,
Mm-hmm.
but I just turned 40 in August, which by the
Mm-hmm.
way, I think is so freaking cool. I think it's so
Yeah,
cool to be 40.
I know.
Um,
Sounds cool.
like my mom thinks it's weird, and I'm like, I think it's such a gift. Not everyone makes it, and not everyone
Yeah.
like learns and sees where they've come. And like, how
Mhm.
can I be upset or heavy about the future when when it has all led to this moment? So I think
Mhm.
it's really cool. But
Love that.
like, I think when we talk about like health and wellness, especially eating a certain
Yeah.
way, there's so many women who are like, think about the chore because now they've got to make separate meals. And I always think to myself, I know I'm not a mom.
Mm,
However, like if it's not great for me, why
mm, mm,
is it like, why am I doing things for my kids that I
mm,
wouldn't do for myself? And why have we demonized taking care of ourselves as something that's punishing our children?
yeah.
Like, no
Mm,
wonder you're exhausted because you're trying to live two separate lives. So, like,
mhm,
we have to find that alignment of like what works for our family where I'm
mhm,
setting them up for success. I
yeah.
don't think it's actually robbing our kids of a childhood by feeding them vegetables.
Mm,
I
mm,
think it's setting their bodies up to thrive.
mm,
And we sometimes want to demonize women for using childcare or
mhm.
taking them places with daycare. And it's like, do you know how much fun kids have playing with other kids?
They love it.
Do you know how
Yeah.
much more fun it is when they get to be free and you're not there trying to grown up them?
Mhm, mhm,
Like, it's a gift for them to go play. It's a
yeah.
gift for them to be free. And if knowing that you don't have the capacity for them to do that without the boundaries and the rigidness and the yelling, like why
Mhm,
wouldn't you leverage the scooter and the
mhm,
playground and those opportunities because that's fun for them.
mhm, mhm,
I
mhm.
don't know, like I've always just those are some of the things I process where it's like why do we want ourselves to be trap ourselves into misery
Yeah.
and then also force our loved ones that life is about being miserable all the time?
Mm, yeah. Yeah. And gosh, that was the message that my mom like unconsciously gave to me, like unintentionally gave to me when
Yeah.
I was younger, right? Like I have had to unlearn that this is just how it is, right? Like when I saw her being tired every day and going to work every day for a job that was like sucking away her soul essentially, I was just like, "Oh, I guess that's what adults do." And so like that's the life I started to live. And so much of my journey when you ask about who I am, so much of my journey has been giving myself permission to go after more because so much of what I learned was just like settling for the status quo. And every day, like I'm climbing out of that, right? Because sometimes it's like, I don't want to, I don't feel like it. It takes a lot more work to do those things. But it's like, even, like with the people around us, it doesn't necessarily have to be our children. Like we are always modeling by being intentional about the things that we do, whether it's our health, whether it's our, our professional lives. We're always modeling. You never know who's watching by you making a decision to live with intention.
Yeah. And if you're gonna put in the work, why not put in the work towards something that like brings joy and
Yeah,
fulfillment and future like
yeah,
abundance your way?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, because I don't
Can
think we
I?
can get out of the work. Like, who we think that we want to be lazy and do nothing
Yeah.
and have no
Mhm.
responsibilities. But as someone who took that path thinking that was
Mhm.
the answer after trying to regulate herself,
Yeah.
there was a defined moment where I was like, I need a purpose. I
Mhm.
need to channel. Like I
Mhm.
actually enjoy contributing. I need
Mhm.
something to contribute to. I
Yeah.
need a challenge because my
Yeah.
brain feels really numb and bored. And so like picking
Mhm.
where that energy goes.
So I'm feeling something on my heart that I just want to say to what you just shared. I feel like oftentimes we feel, I call it misalignment, right? Like when you are not operating in your purpose, that misalignment shows up in a lot of ways. And so for you, it felt like energy that need to be channeled and it was just kind of like a numbing out, right? So one of the things I like to talk about is like, what does that feel like? Because sometimes, right, we're like on autopilot. We don't even recognize that life is like trying to tap us on the shoulder and say like, "Hey, this ain't it," in a lot of different ways because it can show up personally and
Or the
professionally.
way
And
we're
so
doing this isn't it.
yeah, 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 that too. So I like to give examples of like what that feels like because sometimes again, like we don't know. We think this
Yeah.
is it. Like this is how it's always been. And so you talked about numbing. There's a level of unfulfillment that oftentimes comes with misalignment, feels like a void, like something is missing. There's that curiosity of like, is this it? Is there more? Like you can feel maybe that there should be more, you desire more, but you don't know what that is. Oftentimes it feels like imposter syndrome, and I have such a different take on imposter syndrome than most people, because I say like if you feel like an imposter in like your job or your life or whatever it is you're doing, it's because you don't fit. Like you're trying to make a square, a round peg fit into a square hole, right? And so oftentimes when we feel like something is off, it's our soul's way of saying, like maybe there's some pivoting that needs to happen here, or some intentionality behind the relationship that needs to happen here. And oftentimes it feels challenging. Like when I was not in alignment, when I first stepped into entrepreneurship, every day was like swimming upstream. It felt really, really hard. There was so much effort. And not that it's like easy now, but it flows different. And so I just like to share some examples of what it might feel like if you are not operating from a place of alignment or purpose, so that you can maybe like take a moment to be like, like what do I need to do to begin to shift, right? To shift to a place that is in more of an aligned space.
Yeah. Yes, 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 yes. And then in that, I don't know if you experienced this, but for me, my experience was learning discernment
Mm,
between, because I don't believe in imposter syndrome. I
mm,
think the concept of an imposter is deceitful and lying.
mm.
And I don't think any of us are really that at our core, like want to
Mhm.
be that at our core, at least
Yeah,
not people who are listening to the show right now. And so like it feels icky because being an imposter means you're being deceitful.
yeah.
And so for me, imposter syndrome doesn't exist. If I'm doing something I've never done before, I can't be an imposter. It just
Mm.
means I'm practicing
Oof.
something new.
Yeah.
And so, like, learning discernment between it being uncomfortable because I've never done it before versus the grinding of it because
Mhm.
it's not what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Oof. I
And
love
that
that.
takes practice and
Mhm.
exploration and being
Mhm.
open to like kind of being your own little scientist of your life. That's not something you just get to snap your fingers because you heard us talk
Mhm.
about it and just all of a sudden you're in knowing. Like it just takes
Mhm.
time and practice and
Yeah.
intention. That's what came through my mind when you had said
Mm.
that. As this has been so, so good. I love bringing the behind the scenes conversations to
Mm.
people.
Yeah.
Like, what are you really talking about? How do you really think? What was that experience really like?
Mm.
Because when we turn to social media, which is such a gift, it's
Mm.
usually the lessons laid out in a framework from the place of knowing. And
Mm.
very rarely do we get to see the messiness that
Yeah.
led to those frameworks coming to be. And so,
Oof.
like, we don't really know that when we're in the journey that it's right because we never really got to
Mm.
experience those behind the scene conversations with people. And so I love bringing this to everyone. And so,
Yeah.
like, as we're wrapping this up, is there anything that's like left on your heart or that you want to share to like bring it all together?
Mm. Yes. You talked about self exploration, and I would just love to like leave that as like the last thing for closing out. So that to me, like knowing yourself is the catalyst for everything else. When I'm working with clients, I start with getting to know yourself before you get to know your ideal client, because usually we think about our client, what their pain points are, what their needs are, and then we go to like what do we want to do to solve that problem, what solution we want to offer. And I'm like, you have to know yourself first. And even if you aren't an entrepreneur and you're listening to this, whatever your life looks like, right? In order to find that fulfillment, that peace, the joy, those things that we've talked about, you have to know yourself. You asked me when I opened up, like, what are the things that you enjoy doing when you're not on? And I'm like, I love going outside in nature. I did not reconnect to that until I took time for self exploration and self discovery. And so I allowed myself to be curious and do exactly what you said. Like, what do I like? Like, because I didn't know. Like, sometimes people will tell you, well, what are things that you enjoyed as a child? I'm like, I don't remember. I remember playing outside with my friends, but I don't remember much outside of that. And so it's okay, right, to not know. but it is not okay to stay in that place of unknown. Like that is where the self exploration, the sitting with yourself, the stillness, the going for a walk around the lake, the distraction free time with yourself, even if it's journaling or bike riding, that's where that becomes important, because all of the things that we talked about, like when it really comes down to it, it's about like clarity, self discovery, like really knowing yourself at your core. Because once you know yourself, then like you can discern, right, if something is off, or you can discern when you're not in alignment, or you can discern when your professional personal life is off. And so I just want to leave that on the table.
That is such a good bow. Such a good bow. How do people connect with you outside of the show?
Yeah, so my website is domrclifton.com, domrclifton.com, and that really has like all the things. I have a entrepreneurial clarity assessment for any of the women that are listening that are in that space, whether full-time, part-time, side hustle. If you're feeling stuck, right? If you resonated with the conversation of maybe something is not right, you can take that assessment. It takes about 3 to 5 minutes, and it will tell you like where you're getting stuck, what are some practical things you can do to begin to take action to get out of that. And so I just want to, that's on my homepage of my website. I just want to call that out for anyone who resonated with our conversation today and is ready to take some action.
Yes, go grab that downloadable and spend some time with yourself. We were talking about this whole episode, like, how do you pause? How do you bring peace in the busyness?
Yeah.
It can be as simple as downloading a guide when you're going to the restroom and then
Mm-hmm.
filling out the guide after you lay the kids to bed or while you're eating lunch or when you're doing other things. Like sometimes, while it's not ideal, we just have to decide we want something different
Mm-hmm.
and then habit stack those things so that we can get through the sucky part to create the space where we
Right.
don't have to do it while we're using the bathroom or
Yeah.
all the other things. And so I want to leave you with that. This was such a great episode. Thank you so much for coming to chat. With that, that's Two Humans Talking. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this episode as inspiring and actionable as I did. If you're ready to stop just surviving and start living a life where your health, your relationships, and your career work together without the burnout, then it's time that you join the Modern Women's Society. Inside, I'll walk you through my life GPS system, a proven blueprint to help you have it all while thriving. You'll gain tools, coaching, and the kind of clarity that brings big dreams to life without the stress, overwhelm, guilt, and shame that the modern woman is used to. We're going to create a life where you feel energized and excited to wake up every day and fulfilled when you put your head on the pillow. Click the link below to learn more and join countless other women who are redefining success on their terms. Because the life you've dreamed about is closer than you think. I'll see you on the inside.